Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone. My name is Jeremy Walsh, and I'm the Director of Support, Training, and Documentation for BNI Connect. I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar today. Today's webinar is the first part in our series of leadership team webinars for the month, and we have a series of 4 webinars. We're going to start today with the chapter goals for leadership teams. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the leadership team tools and reports. On Wednesday, we're going to talk about chapter web pages, or if you want to be a webmaster for your chapter. And then finally, we're going to end our monthly series on Thursday with the online renewal process for leadership teams. So before we get started on today's topic, which is the chapter goals, couple of housekeeping things. The first of which is that this is a live webinar. So that means if you have any questions as we're going through the material today, please do feel free to ask those questions. I see the questions pop up on my screen, and I can answer them as we're going through the material, or if it's something completely unrelated, we can answer that at the end. There is also a handout with today's webinar. You can see that in the handouts section if you'd like to take home a XLS file of the chapter goals to work on this offline. You're welcome to download that. We're also going to be recording this webinar. The webinar is recorded. It is then put up onto our YouTube channel, youtube.com/BNI Connect Global. Again, that's youtube.com/BNI Connect Global. You can also find the list of upcoming webinars as well as the recordings up on the support site. Just click on this question mark in the upper right-hand corner. We're scheduled for about 30 minutes worth of content. It takes about 25 minutes or so to go through the chapter goals program. That being said, I am always happy to stay on these calls until every single one of your questions are answered. So please do feel free to ask those questions, even if it does look like we're getting to the bottom of the hour, because I will stay on the call longer if necessary. All right, so let's get started with today's topic. And again, that's going to be chapter goals for leadership teams. And one of the things that BNI Connect has that not a lot of leadership teams know about is the ability for you to go in and set up your goals for the next 6 months or even the next year. Traditionally, leadership teams change over in April and then again in October, although some people stay on for a full year. And BNI Connect allows you to go in and set up those goals. Now, once you set up the goals in the system, the great part is that you can then follow along with those goals as the year progresses. So that means that as you set a goal for, let's say, number of members in your chapter, you can see whether or not your chapter is growing and meeting those expectations. You can also set up what's called mechanisms, which are kind of like little reminders of what you want to do during the year. So we'll talk about that as well. Now, the place to find the goals in BNI Connect, we do have to go to that scary place beyond the home screen. So the home screen, of course, is all of our up-to-the-minute reports as far as our referrals and thank you for closed business and visitors and how to submit all of our slips. But in order to get to this other portion, we're going to have to go into the menus. And the menus are up top here: network operations, reports, tools, and admin. The way I remember where to go to find stuff in BNI Connect, network is where you go if you want to do any networking components. In other words, the groups, the connections, the testimonials, things like that. Operations and reports are really where you're going to spend the majority of the rest of your time. Reports are read only. That's the thing to remember. Reports are read only. So that means that if you need to enter something, you need to do something, you need to create something in BNI Connect, make sure you go into the operations menu. So for example, the POMS report, if you're going to be entering a POMS report, data entry goes in operations. If you're just looking for the statistics later, you can get that from the reports menu. So because we want to enter our goals and use this tool, we're going to go into the operations menu. So if we go to operations chapter, we'll see our list of different operations that we can perform while working this chapter. About halfway down, you should see manage goals. Now, there's 2 things listed there: enter chapter goals and view chapter goals. As a leadership team person, as somebody that is the president, the vice president, the secretary treasurer, or the director consultant for the chapter, you'll have the ability to go in and edit or adjust your chapter goals. Now, your other members of your team, educational coordinator, just the members of your chapter, the visitor host, everybody else in your chapter should be able to view the chapter goals, but they won't see this option to enter chapter goals. One other thing before we click into that, if you're ever stumped a little bit later and you need some more information about the chapter goals or anything else in the system, anytime you see a little question mark here in front of a function, that will take you to the help document for that function. For example, if I click on Enter Chapter Goals, this will take you to the help document. There's a little video here for how to enter goals and a step-by-step guide as to all the different things available within the goals program. So after today's webinar, if you need to share that with anybody, feel free to click through to that question mark. Sharon has a quick question. What percentage of chapters use chapter goals online, and how has it helped them? Now, Sharon, I'm not really sure of that statistic. Unfortunately, I don't have a way to query that in the system. However, what I can say is that there are a couple of regions out there. For example, this was really spearheaded and created by specific region in the Florida, the central Florida area by a man named Tom Fleming. He is actually one of probably the most successful executive directors in the United States. They've had an average chapter size of over 40 members for years now. And I can tell you that every single one of his chapters uses the goals program. That is one of their primary mechanisms for keeping their particular region strong throughout the year. There are a number of other regions around the world that also do that, but unfortunately, I don't have a percentage of how many that is. So does that answer your question, Sharon? So, and I'll give you an example of that later when I go to show you a couple of live sets of goals. All right, so in order to go in to the chapter goals, we're going to click on Enter Chapter Goals. Now, the first time you go in here, what you'll see is three things on this first screen: a start month, long-term vision, and a mission statement. And the long-term vision and mission statement are going to be blank. Those are the first things that you do need to come up with. The long-term vision is really kind of the where you want to get to. This is your BHAG for the chapter. If anybody knows what a BHAG is, that's a big, hairy, audacious goal for your chapter. And less so much in numbers, but in ideas. What is your guiding light there for your chapter? So here I'm working in the Antarctic region with my Shiver Burr chapter. And up in the Burr chapter, our leadership team has decided we want to grow the chapter to be the largest chapter in the entire continent. In addition, we wish to be the #1 chapter in closed business and referrals within a 200-mile radius. So that is our long-term vision. That's what's going to inspire us to do what we're going to do in our chapter. Below that is the mission statement. So if the long-term vision is kind of where you want to get to in the long run, the mission statement is going to be your guiding principles for how you're going to get there. So what ideas are you going to embrace along the way? And here in the Burr chapter, we want to help members increase their business through a structured, positive, and professional word-of-mouth program that enables them to develop long-term, meaningful relationships with quality business professionals. So that is our mission statement for the chapter. The long-term vision is the what, the mission statement is the how. The next thing that we have here is the start month and year. Now, the way that the goals program works, and mostly it's just from a screen real estate perspective, is that when we click go, it is going to create a 6-month calendar for us to fill out. Now, you can choose any 6 months you want to. By default, we're going to put in the next upcoming 6-month period. In other words, a lot of leadership teams change over in April. So they're putting in the April time frame for establishing the goals for that next leadership term. But you don't have to use that 6-month period. You can use from today forward if you'd want to, or from last month forward. Whatever 6-month period you'd like to work on, you can choose that. Just drop this down. And let's say I want to start out with this month. I can do that. I can start out with February, and I have my long-term vision and mission statement, which you only have to do once. When I click go, again, it creates this spreadsheet for me to fill out. And what you can see I have here is I have dates along the top. So I have February, March, April, May, June, July. And then if I scroll downwards, I have a number of things in the blue headers. Now, the things in the blue headers, those are called the chapter success drivers. The chapter success drivers. Those are the things that we're measuring. That which gets measured gets done. So we're measuring these different success drivers, and those are attendance, total number of one-to-ones, CEUs or chapter education units, visitors, new memberships, total number of members in the chapter, number of referrals, and thank you for closed business. And for each of these, for 6 months, we are going to establish a goal. Now you'll notice there's something else under there. It says Mechanism 1 and Mechanism 2. How many of you guys out there, being on the leadership team is your only job in life? Probably none of you. All of us have our other careers, our jobs, our businesses. I mean, that's the reason we're in BNI, is to support these other businesses. So one of the traps that a lot of us fall into is that, we get to our BNI meeting on a weekly basis, and then we do all of our stuff, including all of our leadership team responsibilities. And then as soon as the meeting's done, we got to rush off and deal with our own businesses. And before we know it, a whole week has gone by, and then we have our next chapter meeting. In the meantime, we may have forgotten some of the leadership team responsibilities that we were supposed to do. For example, let's say I've been meaning to do to play the BNI game with my chapter, but I just keep forgetting to schedule it, and I forget to keep mentioning at the meeting, and then 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks goes by, and it still hasn't been done. The purpose of the mechanisms is so that we can remind ourselves as leadership team members what it is that we wanted to accomplish that month, or what things are we going to do to help to support the goals that we're establishing for that particular chapter success driver. So let's just take a look at this. Before we start putting in numbers, you'll notice there is one other thing at the top in this top gray bar here. It says enter goals for the whole chapter or per member. Now, what that comes down to being is whether or not you like to work with a big number or a small number. It is going to affect really the calculations when we go to view the report later. So when we, for example, we're looking at for the whole chapter for the month, for things like one-to-ones. If we have 20 members in the chapter and we're looking to do one per week, when we're establishing goals for the whole chapter, that's going to be 20 times 4 weeks, or 80 one-to-ones. If we're doing this as a per member basis, we're going to be putting it in as 4 one-to-ones, because that's going to be a per member number, and it will do the calculation based on your anticipated number of members for you. I can tell you that most people, when they're working on this, they use the for the whole chapter numbers. But again, you are welcome to use whichever one you'd like. You can't switch back and forth though, so it's one setting for the entire report. All right, so let's start with attendance percentage. Okay, so attendance percentage, let's say that I happen to know, for example, and one of the reasons I like to start with this month is you kind of know where you are right now. So here in the February, I can put a goal in, and we're just about at the end of February. We have about 1 meeting, 2 meetings maybe left in the month. I kind of know where we're going to end up, and we're going to end up right now with about a 92% attendance rating. Now that's not great, but I think by the end, I'd like to get up to maybe 96, 97% attendance to end out this 6-month period. So what I like to do is to start with where we are and then put the end result in. And from here, it's usually just a matter of math to go in and split the difference to get all the way up to where you want to be. So I would know that by the end of 97 minus 92, that's 5. So I need to move up by 5 points, which happens to be 1 per month. So 93, 94, 95, 96, and then 97. So I need to increase by 1 percentage point a month to be able to attain my goal. Now, there's a lot of people that will argue that's a little bit too simplistic, and you can make this much more complicated if you'd like to. For example, you know that maybe as we get to June and July, those are starting to be the summer months. People start taking time off. You know, attendance is going to drop a little bit. If you'd like to take some of those complications in mind, by all means do. What I will tell you is that it's generally speaking, it's better to have something down than to have nothing down waiting for it to be perfect. So what I would recommend doing is to just let's get some basics in here. If you'd like to go back and tweak them later, then by all means you can go back and tweak them. All right, so with that said, what are some mechanisms that can support better attendance? So I know, let's say next month, I would like to start and make sure that our VP, one thing that we can do to support attendance is make sure that the VP is sending out the control letters. So if a person is absent once, they get the, oh, I'm sorry you weren't here letter. And if they're out twice, say, oh, attendance is important. Just wanted to remind you of the policy that 3 absences and you may be asked to leave the chapter. So make sure that they're following that procedure. So I'm going to put that in VP control letters. And this will remind me to work on that next month. And you know what? That may take a few months to take effect. So I'm going to put that in as a follow-up for the next month as well. All right, some other things that may help with attendance, maybe an educational moment on bringing substitutes. All right, and really this is about you sitting down with your leadership team and mapping out your strategy for the next 6 months so you can start to fill in those blanks. Now, once we have attendance in, I actually recommend skipping down towards the bottom of this spreadsheet, because I think one of the most important things to do next is to really decide how big you want your chapter to be and how many members you want to have in your chapter. This one's really important because this one will help to determine a lot of the rest of the goals. So for example, especially if you're doing for the whole chapter numbers, before we can determine how many referrals we want to pass and how many visitors and all of that, we kind of need to know how many members we're going to have in the chapter. So once again, I'd like to begin where we are and then keep the end in mind. So I can start out with a goal of where we are this month, and we happen to be 20 members right now, and we really, really want to grow the chapter. So let's say in the end of this 6-month period, I want to get to 30 members. So we're going to grow by a net of 10 members. So that should mean that that's about 10 divided by 6 months. So we're looking at about 2 members per month, 24, 26, 28. We need to grow by approximately 2 members per month. Again, you can keep in mind other things like visitors days and increase the number of members for that month if you'd like to, and come up with other strategies. Again, I like to keep it simple, at least to get stuff in there to start with rather than procrastinating it. All right, and what can we do to support the number of members in the chapter? Well, one thing we could do is we're going to be participating in member extravaganza, and that goes from now through June. So extravaganza, and make sure that we have that because that's going to go all the way through to the beginning of June. So we're going to talk about that every week. We're going to make sure people are participating. We'll make sure that we're announcing the number of new members they have. As you know, with extravaganza, if you sponsor 6 or more members into your chapter during that time, your name, every sponsor's name gets entered into a raffle for a prize. I believe this prize is for a trip to the U.S. National Conference here in the United States. And other countries, please do check with your executive director. All right, other things that we can do during this time to increase the number of members in the chapter. Maybe we can do an educational moment on why we want to grow the chapter. And we're going to concentrate on contact spheres. All right, and again, we can do a number of other mechanisms there as well. Now, before we go too much further, make sure that once in a while you click the Save button. You can click the Save button as often as you'd like to. It'll keep you right there on that page, but just like working with any good document or spreadsheet, save it so that you don't lose it. All right, so working my way up, there's the next two that really fall into place, especially once we know the number of members in the chapter. So in order to increase by this 2 every month, we know how many members we have to get each month in order to fulfill that. So if we're going from 20 to 22 to 24, 26, 28, 30, that's really growing by 2 members each month. However, we can't just say that we need 2 new members each month because we need to have a net increase of 2. Now, one of the things with the new memberships and with BNI in general is we do have some attrition, meaning people that will always just leave the chapter. And a lot of times that's for good reasons or reasons that are outside of our control. For example, their business grows to the point where they just can't handle it anymore. They're not prepared to grow rapidly enough. Maybe they'll come back at a later time, but they needed to leave right now. Maybe it's that family member is leaving, or maybe there's a new family member joining. All of these different reasons that might cause somebody to leave. Now, we still like them, we still respect them, we hope they come back again, but on average, a BNI chapter will lose about 1 member per month or about 12 per year. So we do need to keep that in mind. So we're not just growing by 2 new members each month, we really are growing by 3. In order to have a net 2, we need to plan on 3. And again, we can look at ways that we can support that new membership growth. Now, if something matches from another success driver, we can just copy this. For example, that's going to support this goal as well. And of course, we can come up with other mechanisms. Now, if you're not sure about mechanisms, one thing you can do is click on this button at the top. It's called the Chapter Goal Guide. And you'll see here that in the Chapter Goals Guide, there are a number of all the different chapter success drivers as well as different ideas for each of those particular categories. So for example, memberships per month, let's say make sure that the visitor hosts are early to the meeting to greet and welcome guests. Make sure they're running a proper visitor orientation after the meeting. Implement a referral thank you program, the chapter mentoring program. So let's say that we're going to highlight this, we can copy it, and we can paste this as a mechanism into the number of new members. All right, so if we know the number of new members, now we can work on visitors because in order to get new members, we do have to have visitors to the chapter. Now, this one is going to depend slightly on your chapter and your chapter personality. What you need to figure out is what your conversion ratio is. Now, you can find this from a traffic lights report as well. But a conversion ratio is essentially how many visitors come through the chapter and how many of those visitors turn into new members. Is it 1 in every 4 visitors? Is it 1 in every 10 visitors? Is it 1 in every 3 visitors? So let's say that you have a 1 in 4 visitor conversion. That would mean that in order to get 3 new members, you need 4 times as many visitors, which would be 12 visitors. So essentially, we need to have 12 visitors per month in order to gain 3 new memberships. And once again, we can come up with ways to support that. Let's say we want to work on visitor orientation. Right? And there's plenty of things that you can do to fill that in. Now we can start working on the per member goals, and that's the number of one-to-ones, the CEUs, and referrals. Now, in our chapter, we try to concentrate on the power of one. We really strive for one CEU, one one-to-one, and one referral per week for each of our members. So this makes this fairly easy for me as far as doing the rest of these, because I can just take, for example, the number of members in the chapter and multiply that by 4. So here we have 80, then we have 88, and then 96, oops, not 86, 96. 104, 112, and 120. That would be an average of 1 per week times 4 weeks each month. And again, I can put those in on the other ones as well, since we're looking to do the same thing for CEUs and for one-to-ones. And then finally, all the way at the bottom, we have a thank you for closed business. For this one, what I like to do is to decide how much thank you for closed business you want to pass in a year. If you want to be $1 million chapter, for example, you're going to need to pass about $100,000 worth of business each month. So I'm going to put in 100,000 and do that across the board for me. And that will make us actually a $1.2 million chapter, but I'm sure there's going to be months when we have less and we have more. Once again, I'm going to save this. And if I go back to the operations menu, I can then view my chapter goals. I can choose a 6-month period here. Now I just entered them in from February. And what we can see is our goals, our results, and also it has what we were concentrating on that month. Now, this is Antarctica. My vice president doesn't put POMS reports in very often, so it's not a very good example. Remember how I told you before, those regions in Florida that do this regularly? Let me switch over to one of those regions. So this is the Florida Central West regions and the down in Tom Fleming's region, and I should be able to pick any of these chapters, view their chapter goals. And again, every single chapter, they have yet to fail me, but every single chapter there has their goals filled out. So this happens to be the BNI Powerhouse chapter in Central West Florida. Their long-term vision is to be the most effective referral organization in the villages, and by passing qualified business referrals, increase profits for each member. Their mission statement, to positively impact our members' business and the community we belong to. And what we can see here is over the course of the last 6 months, how are they doing on their goals? They're shooting for 100% attendance. They got 95, 93, 93, 96, 96. Their total number of one-to-ones, they seem to be crushing it for the most part. 360, they got 495. 378, they've got 513. 480 in December, they were shy just a little bit. And once again, we see all their mechanisms, but this is a great way for them to follow along. And we can see that they're in the 60s as far as their chapter goes. So their chapter has had a goal of 60 members. They actually had 63. They had a goal of 63. They stayed at 63. And it looks like they dropped down a little bit, but they're hoping to get back up to 67. So again, it's a great tool for successful chapters. And with that, we are at the bottom of the hour. What I'd like to do now is to open this up to questions. If anybody has any questions whatsoever, I would absolutely love to answer those questions now. While you're thinking of any questions, just a couple of other little housekeeping things. As a reminder, this is being recorded and you'll be able to review it later, or if you're not here with your entire leadership team, maybe you want to share this with your leadership team. I will have the recordings posted on the support site as well as the YouTube channel. Support site, click on this big question mark in the upper right-hand corner. That will take you over to the support site. You'll see our list of upcoming webinars. our very next webinar and a good referral for me. That one's going to be slightly longer. This one takes about an hour, but we're going to talk about leadership team tools and reports. We're going to go through just about all the reports in the system, show you the benefits of using them, and maybe even introduce you to a couple of reports that you didn't know were there. We'll also go through things like how to enter a PALMS report and how to do the speaker rotation and how to assign a mentor and a mentee, things that you also may or may not have known were available in the system. And then we'll start the whole thing over again in March. So good referral for me is to please let people know about these webinars and offer them a registration link. You'll also see a link up at the top for recorded series, February, January, et cetera, et cetera. I can click on February 2016, for example. This is where today's webinar will be loaded. Hopefully within a day or two, I'll have this up here in this placeholder. And of course, you can always go to our Facebook channel. I would absolutely love it if you gave us a like up here on our Facebook channel. We do tips and tricks and reminders and all sorts of stuff there. And then finally, youtube.com/BNI Connect Global is where we have our video library. All right, so we do have a quick question here from Philip. Philip says, in your experience, have you noticed that hard to reach goals work better or easier to obtain goals? That's going to depend on your leadership team. So I find hard goals are good as long as they're not impossible. There's nothing more frustrating than trying to hit an impossible goal and then keep missing it. So the other thing is that the goals are changeable. They are not set in stone. So if you establish a really hard goal and 3 months into it say, man, I put that goal way too high, you can go in and adjust it to lower the goals. Or let's say you're blowing your goals out of the water. Go in and adjust them, make your goals higher. So really you have to work with the personalities in your chapter to decide, which is the best avenue for you. Again, my idea of it is, they should be hard to reach goals, but not impossible goals. Does that help, Philip? All right. What other questions do you guys have? Any other questions? All right, if there's no additional questions, what I'm going to say is thank you guys so much for being here today, taking this time to spend learning more about BNI Connect, and which will hopefully also benefit your chapter in the long run. I look forward to seeing you on a future webinar, and happy connecting.